a lot of people who watch the series, and I myself, would like to be like Avon in certain circumstances because he survives. I invested certain elements in his character that I would like in mine. For example, I made him scrupulously honest. If he said he'd kill you, he would. You are rather stuck with the character. Forever Avon, as it were. I mean, I am him and he is me. And my book, which I have written, is called You're Him, Aren't You? Because that's what people do. As you walk down the street or go into Marks and Spencer's or whatever, they say, oh, you're him, aren't you? And yes, I am. So I'm him for all the rest of my life and have been for the last 25 years since the show was on. I don't mind that. Well, I always played the Avon characters. He was only there because of what was in it for him. So he accepted that Blake was doing his thing, and he went along for the ride as long as it suited him. He would be self-interested, so are you. Bottom line, you know, what's in it for me? And what he wanted to do was steal the Liberator spaceship and go off and live the life of Riley in some planet. Now, according to Jacqueline Pearce, who played Servalan, what he really wanted to do was marry her, settle down and produce little Servalans and Avons to dominate the cosmos. But there you are.
Woe betide all of us.
Woe betide all of us, except them.
One of these days they are going to leave you. They were almost ready to do so this time.
Yes, I thought they might be.
You handled them very skillfully.
Do I?
Yes, the Blake character, I think, was just too good to be true as far as Avon was concerned. He was astonished and said, this guy needs protecting, you know. So Blake rushed in where angels fear to tread, and there was Avon sort of just behind his shoulder with a machine gun. When you're playing the eponymous hero, the man in the white hat, you've obviously got to behave to a certain standard. You can't hit women, shoot people in the back, things like that, whereas Avon could. I think Avon sort of envied his certainty and, if you like, goodness, that he really was a decent man who was trying to do his best for the human race, whereas Avon didn't like the human race. Avon was more Coriolanus, the mob. He disliked them. In fact, there was one episode where he criticizes Blake by saying, you know, you're wading through their blood to achieve what you want to achieve. And if you actually look at his record, he's trying to save the human race. More people die because Blake is trying to save them than are ever killed by Avon.
And I was wrong. Completely, utterly, stupidly wrong.
I noticed that.
I almost killed you all.
I don't think he was Avon. I don't think he was unstable at all. There is an episode, the very last episode, where he's describing going to a planet, and he says it's full of crooks and rebels and psychopaths. Then he smiles, and everybody says, "Oh, he's a psychopath," but a psychopath doesn't know he's a psychopath, so he would not call himself one. So he isn't a psychopath. He's just a realist. I played him as I imagined I would expect to behave given the circumstances that he was in. You would not, for example, unless you're an idiot, come up against the bad guys who have their backs to you and say cooey and get them to turn round before you shoot them. You're giving them a chance. He wouldn't give them a chance. He was a realist. In fact, he'd have killed anybody if it was necessary. He was realistic. And I couldn't understand when people would say, oh, he's a nasty piece of work, he's the baddie, really. And somebody actually said to me, it is the first series I've ever seen where an absolute, can I use the word, is the hero. He said it's never been done before, which it hadn't on television anyway. Of course, when Blake 7 first came out, we thought it was very innovative and exciting and so on, but there were a number of reviewers who thought otherwise. This is one of my favorites. This takes absurdity beyond dialogue into costume. How grown men and women perform this nonsense for adults is beyond me. That was from the listener.
When we have dealt with Star One, I will take you back to Earth, and then the Liberator is mine. Agreed?
Agreed.
Once the Blake character was removed from the equation, he never considered himself to be a leader of any kind. He wasn't interested in anybody else. In fact, I actually said to David Maloney at one particular point, I said he would never in a million years program the new characters, Dana and Tarrant's voices, into Zen on the Liberator. He would never do that because they would then have more control. And David said to me, well, if they don't do it, we haven't got a series. So one had to compromise in the character development, as it were. Terry said to me, he said, I was always fascinated by what you did with what I wrote. He said, I never anticipated that you would do what you did. And so I would write something and I would say, he's told me, he said, I would see what's he going to do with that? And he said, you always surprised me and did something that I didn't expect. So he said, it was a great joy to write for Avon, and I think it was his favourite character. I was in the unique position of being able to do what I really wanted to do. As I said earlier on, if you're the hero, you've got to behave in a certain way. But when you're the guy just behind the hero's shoulder, then you can do what you like. The same applies to, for example, the Spock character in Star Trek. I mean, he was a relatively minor character when he started.
Can we just stop there?
Yeah, sure, okay.
You look so beautiful when you're angry.
Actresses who used to come in to the series for an episode or whatever would get quite cross with me because they'd say, oh, Paul, you kiss me in this episode. And I'd say, well, what's wrong with that? You know, and they say, but everybody that Avon kisses dies, so I won't get another episode out of it. So I was known as the kiss of death to a lot of actresses.
Oh, Avon. Why won't you touch me?
A lot of people thought he was a male chauvinist, but he wasn't. He treated women as equals and equally threatening, for example. So that if he was threatened by a woman, he would treat her as he would treat a man. He'd kill her, hit her, get her by the throat, do what was necessary to stop her harming him. And he liked women. I mean, he had quite a good relationship with Servalan, although, because he understood her, because they were, I think, perhaps somebody suggested different sides of the same coin, maybe. And obviously the one true love of his life, the Anna Grant character who features in the episode Rumours of Death, he kills her. I love that. I love that. He kills the only true love of his life, and he kills the only friend he ever had. This guy is a tragic figure of enormous proportions, isn't he? This is my particular favourite of all the reviews, but then it would be, wouldn't it? Avon was considered an interesting character. As one viewer put it, even though he is callous and apparently without morals, he is still likable. I was first told that he was some kind of an engineer. So, and set in the future. And I said to my agent, how far in the future? And she said, how the hell should I know? It could be next week, could be next year, could be several hundred years, which indeed it was. So I thought, oh, well, I'd better go looking like an engineer. What does an engineer look like? I don't know. So I had, sort of leather patches on my on my elbows of my tweed jacket. I thought that's an architect, really, isn't it? But still, never mind. So I arrived and I met David Maloney, who was the producer, and he said, have a look at this script, tell me what you think of the character called Avon. And I read the script, which was episode 1, and Avon wasn't in it. And I thought, this does not bode well. And then he showed me episode 2, and I realized it boded very well. I saw the potential of the role, and I wondered if they would offer it to me there and then, but they didn't. And I waited about 3 months, and I thought, gosh, they're not going to give me this part. And there were other roles, particularly the part of Mercutio in a tour of Romeo and Juliet, which I wanted to do. But I turned it down to wait for Blake 7. And then when I actually was given the role, I said to the producer, I said, obviously you'd seen lots of other people during the 3 months. And he said, oh no, you were always going to play Avon. I thought, I wish you'd told me 3 months ago.
I was born in Surrey, Chessington, actually. I get a lot of jokes about the zoo. I always wanted to go into films. I was mad about films when I was a boy. I used to go to the cinema a lot. In fact, I got told off for it by my parents. I used to race off from school about 4 o'clock and go into the cinema. So I always wanted to be connected with films in some way, and acting seemed to be a good idea. And at length, I realized that I had a certain amount of ability at it and went to drama school and so progressed from there.
Well, of course, I was born rather a long time ago, and consequently television, although it was available at some time or another, didn't come into our house until I was 14. And so prior to that, I spent most of my time at the cinema, and I loved it. I used to go as often as I possibly could. And in those days, you'd get in for sixpence, 6 old pence or something like that. And you could sit there all day and watch it over and over again. And you got to know all the usherettes. I mean, an usherette used to come down, and say, Paul, your mother's phoned. She needs you to go home for your tea. And I said, oh, right, okay. Because I was halfway through the second showing of Pirates of Monterey or Randolph Scott, in Coroner Creek or something like that. Mary Ridge, one of the directors, who did several episodes, she used to call me Blint, which was a combination of Burt and Clint, Burt Lancaster and Clint Eastwood, because she said that I reminded her of both of them, which was very nice. Ooh. I love westerns, yes. I loved all the action sequences, particularly with the guns and all that sort of thing. In fact, there were several guns that we have that were never used. One with a terrific long barrel, like a buntline special. And I would love to have used that. There's a picture of Glynis, Barbara, and myself around somewhere with these guns, but they were never used in the show. I used to love all that. Great fun. I was brought up on westerns, Shane, stuff like that, who was quick on the draw. And I used to play a trick on Gareth Thomas, who played Blake, because in the early guns looked like hairdryers, really. And you had a little flap which came over the end of the gun to keep it in the holster. Otherwise, when you were running, it was likely to fall out. Well, just before the take, I used to loosen that strap so that they'd go action. And I was always faster on the draw than Gareth, who'd be struggling to get this out. So how do you do that? And I never told him.
Sorry, guns didn't fire. Stop recording.
The Scorpio guns have a cartridge in the barrel, and they would put it in, and it would have various levels, so that if they didn't like the person you were going to shoot, they'd make it a very loud one. Yeah.
Avon, what are you doing?
Set apart.
I was accident prone with props, yes. I broke computers, I broke all the guns. One of the reasons I think why they transferred to a different gun, a more solid weapon, in the latter part of the series, was because I kept breaking all the others. In fact, they did make one for me. I used to call them the hairdryers, because that's what they looked like. They were plastic. They made one with an aluminium core so that I could not break that. And somebody stole it. Believe it or not, these are collectible nowadays, worth a fortune. They even light up, see? Which is more than the originals ever did, believe me. And this jacket You will not believe this, but I actually wore this in Blake 7, and that was 25 years ago, and it still fits. I bet you're impressed. Yes. Now this I wore in one episode only, which I think was called Warlord, if I remember correctly. I do remember correctly because somebody told me before we came on air. But anyway, I wore that. Can you believe it? And this goes for a fortune on eBay or whatever to collectors. And good luck to them. It's marvelous. Well, the leather came around about because A, it is the most comfortable outfit to wear. It's warm in winter when you're out on location. It's very supple, so you can move. I found it very comfortable. Go! Yes, location filming was sometimes great fun. We visited some quite exotic places, like Dunstable. I think Blue Circle Cement let us use their base or whatever it is. So I've given a plug to Blue Circle, haven't I? Perhaps they'll give me some cement. not that I need any, but there you are. We filmed that there because it was pretty good, but it was quite dangerous. They didn't look dangerous, those machines, but they were.
Avon!
And indeed I did. I did all my own stunts. I must have been out of my mind. I wouldn't do it now. I'll tell you, I mean, I won't jump off a chair if I don't have to. I'm crazy. And in fact, the director, who was a bit of a martinet, actually turned around to me at one point and said, I want you to do this. I want you to flip over, hit the two men, and whatever. And the stuntman said, that's very difficult to do. Very difficult. And the director said, can you do it or can't he? Well, now, the stunt arranger then was a personal friend of mine, just went, right, give me half an hour. So he took me aside, taught me how to do it. We went back and he made me do it 8 times. And when he'd finished, the director, who shall be nameless, he went, all right, cut it, print it, and walked away. And Terry, the stunt arranger, walked up to him and said, have we forgotten 2 little words? And he went, oh, thank you. Various things used to go wrong. There was the power station incident down in, I think it was called Oldbury-on-Severn, and it was a nuclear power station. And actually, when we arrived, Michael and I, Michael Keating, who played Villa, we arrived one day. There was a very loud bang, and the guy who was taking us through the power station went pale and said, I hope that was your film crew and not us, because the whole of the southwest would have gone up. And actually, we had quite a few funny incidents there. But this particular incident was Vere Lorimer was directing, and Vere was, how shall I put it, slightly eccentric. But I had to run with the group behind me across the surface where the nuclear fuels were. Quite safe. But there was going to be an explosion there. And at a particular mark, that would happen. And I said to Vere, what happens if it doesn't explode? He said, well, just keep running, he said, and I'll get the shot anyway, and we'll go back and do it again. I ran past the spot where the explosion was supposed to take place. It didn't. And then it did, just as I was abreast of it. And I actually fall. You can actually see it. I fall. What you don't see is I get up in one movement and go, what the, you know, and use, I'm afraid, expletive deleted. And Vere said, well, I'm terribly sorry. Vere Lorimer was a genuine eccentric. I think every actor in the business has worked with him at some time or another. And we all have our stories about him. And he was an innocent in many ways because he didn't realize quite what he was saying half the time. And used to, well, he didn't upset people because of who he was. But he used to get things wrong. For example, in one particular rehearsal, we were doing it, and we had what was called a producer's run of the scenes that we were going to shoot. And David Maloney, the producer, came in, and Vere said, now what happens at the end here? He says, is I have a two-shot of Blake and Avon, and Blake says something, and the cynical Avon says, huh, and then drops out of shot, and then we have a big close-up of Blake, and up come the titles, Blake, Gareth Hunt. You see? He always got everybody's name. The only person he knew was me. He would call Jenna Jennifer and Callie Sally. Now, Jenna was played by Sally, so it got very confusing. And he would do all the stunts for you. And he showed me how to do a stunt once. And he said, what you do is this. And the man was in his 60s, and he rolled down a hill and then got up, and he was covered in muck. And he said, you will do that. He said, but being Avon, you will not fall in a cowpat. Yes.
Now then, about the new series, you want to know what's going to come next. Have you told them all about this? Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
No, I haven't really.
Right. Well, in our new series, boys and girls, we had to think now. They are boys and girls, aren't they?
Of course they are.
Boys and girls of part-time intercourse, naturally.
You're saying it was my 40th?
It was your 40th birthday?
Are you sure it wasn't my 30th?
Or maybe it was.
Maybe it was.
Okay, you tell
yeah.
me then.
Yeah, no, yes, it was my birthday on a particular convention, yes. And you've reminded me that it was in Holborn. And I think they brought on a cake for me, which was very kind.
Does this work? Oh, yes, it does. Thank you very much. This is lovely. I'm rather afraid to cut it because it might explode. It's anything to do with our special effects boys, it probably will. I mean, everybody should have a bit, shouldn't they, Jack?
What, darling?
Everybody should have a bit, yes.
Well, I have.
American conventions, they ask you to sell something for charity. People bid for it. And Terry and I were at a particular convention, Terry Nation, and somebody said, oh, I'd like to buy Terry's tie. And they bid for it. And they bid to have breakfast with you or whatever, you know. And mind you, the money goes to charity, which is fine. Well, obviously, there were various charities that asked us to do something for them. The one to which we were referring, we walked over the bridge in our costumes, was for Bernardo's. And we had a lot of children there, which is great, as we're getting now. And that was fun. And it was cold. I remember it was cold. But talking about leather earlier on, I had the leather, so I was fine. Well, it's been done, really, hasn't it? The movie Serenity is a little bit, in fact, a lot like Blake 7, which was, I think it was called Firefly originally, the series. Very good. Serenity is a very good picture. Plug that one now. Yes. So I think that's your Blake 7 of today. So I suspect that it wouldn't come back. Terry Nation's plan for a revival, he wanted to do a mini-series, sort of 2-3 episodes, you know, of an hour or 2 hours or whatever, to finish it all off. That's what he wanted. Not necessarily another series, but a mini-series. And the idea was that Avon was still alive and had been dumped on some planet. So it's kind of like Napoleon being dumped on Elba. And 20 years later, they're going, oh, well, we got rid of all the bad guys, the dissidents. And then somebody says, hang on, this Avon character, we didn't kill him. And they said, well, we better do something about it. So Ingo the SAS or whatever, to take him out, and this him off. And so he goes into the equivalent of Napoleon's last 100 days and dies.
Really?
Yes. Terry Nation was a great guy, terrific guy, lovely man, laid back, cool, very, very bright, of course. And we were on a wavelength, we just hit it off. We spoke together initially in a reserved way because we didn't know each other. And then we got an award. He got an award as a writer and I got an award as an actor in science fiction. And we met at length then, became very friendly, and communicated for quite a while. And then I would go over and stay and as I said earlier, we sort of became one of the family, and he was a terrific guy. We had a lot of fun together. He always used to think I was a kid, you see, because we would go to, for example, we went to the Beverly Hills Hotel. You've got to, haven't you? And there's the red carpet. And Terry said, well, we'll park down here, he said. And I said, but I want to go up the red carpet. And he said, yeah, but that costs an extra $5. I've got a tip. And I said, but I want to go up the red carpet. And he said, oh, okay. So he had to go up the red carpet. He paid the extra $5. And then he said, what do you want to do today? And I said, I want to go down to Man's Chinese, you know, and put my feet in Humphrey Bogart's. And he said, you're just a kid, aren't you? And I loved it. You see, he was very kind to me. The whole family were. And we had a lovely time, and he wrote one of the most wonderful roles for me. What he could do, which a lot of writers can't. I don't mean to be offensive, but a lot of writers can't do it. Is to actually go with the flow of the performer that you've got. And he did that with me. You see, as I said earlier on, he said I would do something. He said you constantly surprise me, so I'd give you something else. So in other words, we were working together. Without really knowing it, as it were. And that's what he was good at. He could see what could be done and gave you the opportunity to do it. Simple as that, really. And that's rare. And I always felt that it was a great pity that we didn't do the mini-series. And sadly, he's dead now, because he could have written it, and I think it would have been a cracker. I really did. Was it worth it?
Was it all worth it?
Worth it in so much as it was extraordinarily enjoyable to do. I think there was a terrific chemistry between the cast, which contributes rather, to its success. I've been around the world. I made a lot of friends, not just in the business, but friends who were fans, as it were, and. I've had a whale of a time. It is a double-edged sword to a certain extent, in so much as it cuts you, good analogy, isn't it? Cuts you out of certain roles, because people don't imagine you can do anything else, because there is a lack of imagination sometimes among some directors, not you, of course, and that can happen. But generally speaking, I've done all right. As Walter Matthau said when he collapsed on the set, and Jack Lemmon rushed over and said, Walter, are you all right? He opened one eye and said, I make a living. Yeah. I might wander off with this. I can make a few bob. Yes, go on. Yeah, okay. See you. The thing about Avon's smile, we were talking earlier about did I steal anything from the movies. I stole from Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen rarely smiled. If you see The Great Escape, for example, he rarely smiles. And he gets to a particular point and turns around to Richard Attenborough and says, you're 50 feet short, and smiles at a moment of disaster. So I pinched that from him. Thank you, Steve. And so at a moment of disaster, he smiled. And what is the justification for that? It's irony. For example, Avon wants the Liberator, it blows up, just as he's about to get it. What do? You smile, don't you? You smile. And the same right at the end, when he levels the gun, Mary said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I think he'd bring the gun up, and he'd smile. And she said, all right, I'll do the jump, which I love, the jump cut, boom, boom, boom. And then he goes, and there's the smile. And he goes. How's that?
Beautiful, yeah, it's great. Thank you very much. How did that look to you? Did we get it? Yeah. Thank you, Paul. That's excellent. We can have a coffee break.
Thank you for a wonderful day's work. Do my bit to mature. Lovely.
Hey, there you go.
Liberator.
You always wanted to get your hands on the Liberator, now you have.
Now I have.